If you're new to the channel, you may not know that I am a vegan. However, I am a very pragmatic, very nihilistic vegan. I don't believe in most of the things that most of my fellow vegans believe. So for example, I don't believe that animals have a soul. I don't believe in an afterlife. I don't believe in reincarnation. I don't believe in karma, neither the Buddhist idea of karma nor the Hindu idea of karma. Nevertheless, I'm a vegan. Veganism, I think, is the right thing to do. In the same way, I do make ethical decisions as a consumer, but I do not believe in ethical consumerism. As the title of this video suggests to you, I regard ethical consumerism as a myth, although it is a myth constructed out of good intentions and people trying to rationalize even good things they're doing, which is fine. So I don't really have anything against the practice of ethical consumerism, but let's talk a little bit about the theory and the way in which it can be misleading, or the way in which people can kind of delude themselves with their belief in this theory. The pricing mechanism in economics is a way of sharing information. When the price of something goes up, it can indicate scarcity. It can actually indicate scarcity of many different kinds. You get into some really surreal questions in economics when you look at the pricing of heart surgery. There was a time in the United States of America when, performing routine heart surgery, surgery for heart attacks, was a new development in medical science, when there were very few people who had been trained to perform this operation, and when it was considered risky. Of course, there still is some risk. Then over time, partly just because of the proliferation of heart surgeons, more and more people had this skill. Believe it or not, there's supply and demand, and the price of having a heart attack went down and down. The price of actually paying for heart surgery went down. Now, the United States of America is one of the only countries in the world that has free market principles with heart surgery, and on a huge scale too. I don't know what you can learn from looking at the price of heart surgery in Cambodia or something. This is a very, very strange area of economics. So, but in that case, let me just say, the scarcity has to do with the skilled staff who can take it out. The reason why the price is high is also things like fear, whether you think you're going to live or you're going to die if you buy this product. That can be an issue with other products too. The price communicates information, okay? When people purchase something, when they pay the price, they are also communicating something through the market, right? Like, hey, I could have chosen the cheapest product available, but instead you chose something more expensive for this reason or that reason, okay? And when you refuse to buy something, whether you engage in a boycott or you refuse to purchase something for some other reason, you may be sending a signal also. You're sending a signal that you don't want this low quality product, you want something that's more expensive and higher quality. You may be sending the signal that you don't want to buy something that's made in China. You instead want to buy something that's made in the United States of America, or something that's made in Europe, whatever. There are all these things that are sent through the price mechanism, through the purchase mechanism. There is the sharing of information through free market mechanisms. However, it's very dangerous that people try to talk themselves into believing that they're sharing more information than they really are sharing, and that they're communicating something through the protest, through the act of purchase or refusing to purchase, that cannot possibly be the signal communicated to the market. So I have known various women who would say to me that they refuse to buy clothing from a certain company because that company has overly skinny models. The models are too slim that are advertising this clothing, right? If you want to communicate to that company that you are not buying their product because you think the models are emaciated, you think the models look anorexic or something, you want them to use fleshier models in their advertising, okay? You cannot communicate that information through just refusing to purchase the clothing made by that brand, right? There's no way they're going to be looking at their accounts and they're going to get that signal, okay? Now, you can communicate that message through other methods. You could write letters. You could start a letter writing campaign. You could start collecting hundreds of signatures from people. You could organize a feminist group. There are ways you could communicate to that company, hey, we like your clothing, we want to buy your clothing, but we're refusing to buy it for this reason. But that's not packaged into the signal. The signal there is not going to be specific, and it's not linked to that variable, because that company, it's not in the modeling business. It's not even in the poster making business. It's not in the advertising business. They're in the clothing manufacturing business. That's all of what they're paying attention to. When they look at what sells and what doesn't, the last thing on their mind is, oh, the models are too skinny. They're going to be looking at those products and say, oh, gee, last year this type of clothing sold better and this year it sold worse. Well, maybe it's for this reason, maybe it's for that reason. They're going to be looking at fashion and the climate. They're going to be looking at a million factors, and it's not even going to occur to them. All right? Now, I've used this example before. There was a bakery I used to go into regularly. I don't know. I probably went in 5 times or 10 times in Canada. And, I asked them, look, I need to know which breads are vegan and which ones aren't. Because, in the Western world, normally, even if they don't mean for them to be vegan, a lot of bread is vegan. There's no reason for it to contain dairy or eggs. And my having that conversation with the person repeatedly, again, maybe 5 times, really communicated to them this is something they need to get organized on. It's something they need to care about, right? Before, they just didn't pay any attention, and they didn't know. I'd go in and ask, and they'd say, okay, we got to phone the baker. We got to add, because they didn't know. They didn't know. Some of them they knew had milk powder. Some of them had egg wash or something. Some didn't. And the woman said to me, the last time I went and had this conversation, she said, we need to start a checklist and keep track of which breads are vegan and which ones are, because we don't know. And I'm sorry. She should just recognize this is something important. If I had just walked into the store, looked at the bread, turned around and walked out, if I had just not bought bread there, that doesn't communicate that signal, okay? If I simply never walked into that store at all, I only walked into a vegan baking store and only bought bread there, right? So this question applies to other ethical problems linked to veganism. I had one person ask me sincerely, we were speaking through voice chat, it was like Skype, and I could see him and hear his voice. He was not joking. He asked seriously, should he refuse to buy almonds because indirectly farmers growing almonds are part and parcel of the honey industry. They employ bees, honey bees, to pollinate the almond trees, so on and so forth. I'm sorry if I misremember. I believe that example was almonds. And I pointed out to him, I said, look, when you refuse to buy meat, when people don't buy meat, that does send a signal, okay? But if the signal you want to send is that you want to buy almonds that are raised without bees being used for pollination, or maybe it's even more specific. Maybe it's that you're okay with bees for pollination, but not for honey production. You want non-exploitative use of pollinators or something. I don't know. There are alternatives to bee-based pollination for those industries. If that is the signal you want to spend, then it's like trying to influence the fashion industry to stop using emaciated models. This is something so specific, you cannot possibly communicate that simply through purchasing one product or refusing to purchase another. The idealized outcome of people buying less and less cow milk and buying more and more soy milk, oat milk. Oat milk is a big story this year, 2019. This is now 2020. But 2019 was the year of oat milk in North America, where the market exploded for this. There's a very simple signal being sent through free market mechanisms. People want less cow milk. They want more soy milk, oat milk, non-dairy alternatives. Okay, so everyone gets that. That's clear. But you can't address the use of bees in nut farming, nut agriculture this way. You can't address the use of animal byproducts in recycling car tires this way. Okay, the creation of the rubbery mix that goes into car tires, the creation of the very strange mix of things that's in tarmac, in road resurfacing. To my knowledge, again, partly because it is so cheap, they use some materials that are slaughterhouse byproducts, that are, I think it's bone meal and gelatin and stuff is churned up in some of these processes. I'm not an expert. If that is the issue you want to tackle, again, that would probably involve legislation or something. There is no way you can communicate that by refusing to drive on a road. You say, oh, I know that when this road was resurfaced, they used bone meal or they used animal byproducts in paving this road, whereas this other road, it wasn't. They just, the company didn't. That's not even an intentional choice, obviously. It was just one road versus another. Oh, no, I'm not going to buy these tires. I'm going to buy this tire for this reason. there is no way the pricing mechanism or the boycott mechanism could possibly communicate that. Okay? So ethical consumerism as a movement, there's a problem with information both ways. One problem is the consumer communicating information to the producer, and the other, frankly, is the ignorance of the consumer himself or herself. Because people write into me all the time about Nike shoes. Every single time I've addressed this, I sent the person links to Nike's ethical commitments and the independent auditors. I said, you didn't even Google this. Nike has one of the best records in the world. Here, look. Okay? Nike pioneered new methods of having independent auditors come in and look at, human rights and quality of life in their factories, and those reports are posted direct to the internet. Nike doesn't get to censor them. And when a factory is bad, like they're treating their workers too poorly, then they have a system where the factory gets a couple months to try to improve conditions, and they send people back in to inspect it. And if they haven't improved it, if they go past the point, then they end all cooperation with that factory and they create a new factory or sign a contract. Nike was a world leader in this, and they're also a world leader in this kind of transparency. So there's a problem with information going both ways. There's the delusion that you as a consumer are communicating something meaningful to the producer, and there's an even more dangerous ego trip that you as a consumer know more than the producer when you have never taken the time to really do research into, for example, factory conditions or into the ecological consequences of some of these decisions people make. There's actually a lot for you to know if you really want to engage in this religion of ethical consumerism. I hear people all the time making very lazy claims about how plastic is destroying the world. And if you just use Socratic method for a few moments, okay, so you're assuming there'd be less of a negative consequence if that were made of wood, if that were made of steel, if that were made of glass? Really? Have you ever done the math? Have you ever looked that up? No? It would be a lot of work for you to know these things. Now, you can probably tell I've done enough miscellaneous research in my life that I'm at least aware of these factors, that actually very often plastic packaging is ethically superior and ecologically superior to the non-plastic alternatives. Really? I'm aware that sometimes a big corporation like Nike has much higher ethical standards and better conditions for workers in factories than a small mom and pop company that doesn't have any of this auditing, any of these ethical commitments, doesn't have any of this track record history, and they don't have the budget even to make these efforts to improve human rights in factories. Okay? I'm aware of these contradictions because I've done social science research on a variety of things. But even still, I'm aware that I can't know it all. So my attitude, even though, yes, I am a vegan, and in some ways I do engage in ethical consumerism, but I don't believe in it because I think there are dangerous delusions involved, both in terms of what information I'm communicating to the producer and in the assumptions about what I know from and about the producers as a consumer.